This is the Fifth Estate Winning Headlines, your media police post. In this segment, we summarize some of the headlines that you might have missed this morning, and we take a look at the political pieces we call cartoons in this country. Today is the 19th of June, 2020, and I am DM.
I am Tuam.
And I am Miss K, your host. Again, in case you missed them, these are today's headlines. Daily Nation, let's talk about rape. The Standard, RUTO opens parallel Jubilee party office. And The Star, I will not extend my term, UHURU.
Before you go anywhere.
Welcome, Ms. K. We are very happy to have you back.
Shangu na vigelegele.
It took Corona to bring me back, but here I am.
Welcome back.
Thank you. I think we'll start with The Standard. RUTO opens parallel Jubilee party office.
Absolutely. RUTO opens parallel Jubilee party office. And now, this sneaky man, our deputy president, this is what he said on his Twitter page. He says, I had lunch with Jubilee MPs who are recently assigned other responsibilities in the party. Thank them for exemplary service to the party and the nation. I implored them to continue focusing on Jubilee's people-centered transformational agenda now and in the future. And then he signs off and he says, Sote Pamoja. Now,
That's the new tagline.
That's the new tagline.
Sote
Yes.
Pamoja.
He did not say that there's a new Jubilee party. Now, apparently there is a new Jubilee aSILLY party that they are calling. Jubilee aSILLY, is that correct, DM?
It is correct,
Yeah.
Jubilee aSILLY, and
Yes.
please note,
Yeah.
for those who don't know, that aSILLY means original.
In
This
Swahili.
is in Swahili, in English it means original, and this is very reminiscent of the Ford party. There was Ford Kenya. Is it just Ford? Then Ford Kenya, Ford aSILLY, and perhaps this is the path that Jubilee is going down. Jubilee aSILLY, then we'll have Jubilee People, Jubilee Power, led by Murkomen. We'll see what iterations will follow next. However, I think, in my view, this is a very clever move. You know why?
Yeah.
They've shaken off that bad label of Tanga Tanga. Who wants to be known as Tanga Tanga? It just means you're roving the earth aimlessly. So,
That's true.
aSILLY, how
No,
powerful? What do you think?
We wait for
You
the
know,
Ford power, Ford people
Yeah.
There are two things
iterations.
I want to say here.
Yeah.
First, that new logo, it looks beautiful, although it looks copyright. It looks like a copycat. The entire setup looks nice, you know. But the question Prof likes asking, and then you see, there's one thing about having a beautiful car, for example. You know, in fact, this Jubilee aSILLY party reminds me of a nice S-Class, but with an engine of a Toyota Wish. The second thing I want to say is what RUTO has done, if at all it is true, this is gross insubordination. And he's telling the boss that you can keep your party, I will form mine, and we will continue. And me as deputy president, two things should happen here. Either he resigns as deputy president because he's setting up his own party, he was elected on one ticket to the president, or the president just impeaches. RUTO.
Those are limited and favorable
Yes.
options.
Yes.
It's true.
Oh,
But
yeah.
it is a declaration of
It's
war.
a declaration of war.
It is. I think it's gloves off
Yeah.
now going forward.
Yeah.
I think we're going to our next headline. I'll give us to the Daily Nation. Let's talk about rape. Today is the International Day for the Elimination of Sexual Violence in Conflict. And it has brought to light reports that have been told of, let me start with Machakos County, 400 girls aged 19 and under being reported pregnant in Machakos County between January and May.
4,000.
4,000, sorry. And that would mean then that 27 girls conceived every day. And last year, a report was done by the Kenya Health Information System that said that 400,000 teenagers get pregnant every year. And that was a report for last year. Magoha, our CS for education, dismissed the report as being obnoxious. And I would say that at least he taught us English. However, I'd say that one girl is one girl too many.
It is. And also, why would he dismiss the report? Does he have a report that counters it? He doesn't.
No, he doesn't.
Yeah.
And also, it also brought to light what CS Maraga said. CS Maraga said that since the first case of corona was stated in Kenya, 35.8% of all recorded cases that they are doing within the court system are related to sexual and gender-based violence. I think that the silent victims of coronavirus, although they will not get the virus and will not be treated for it, will be suffering from symptoms of sexual and gender-based violence for their lifetimes.
For a lifetime. This really is a second pandemic that is happening silently. So there are many other victims that are facing horrors in silence. I would like to point out two things. One, that the UNFPA predicts that there'll be 15 million cases of gender-based violence, that is the wide scope including rape, for every 3 months of lockdown that is imposed anywhere in the world. The second thing is that in Nigeria, just recently on the 12th of June, the Republic of Nigeria declared a state of emergency on rape because of the steep cases of rape. I think it was 717 rape cases in 5 months.
I think every decision that will be made regarding coronavirus will have consequences. And some of those consequences are home-based, family-based, sexual and gender-based violence-based. And we cannot go around them, but we have to address them and find ways to mitigate. Our last headline, can I toss us to the star? I will not extend my term, UHURU, and the video that was circulating.
Yes, the president spoke very directly when he was having a virtual meeting with the Atlantic Council of African Center on strengthening US-Africa trade. And he said that he will not be going for another term. In fact, he's very surprised that people interpret the push for a referendum as the push for him wanting to extend his hold on power. And he did say that other Kenyan presidents since 1992 have not done that, have not extended their term limits, and he is not going to be the first to do that. I don't know if I believe him.
No, I totally believe him. I totally believe him. And his is a legal, and it's a legal and also political statement to me. And DM, I actually think that Uhuru Kenyatta will be the last president that Kenya will have with executive powers.
And the first prime minister, or the second prime minister.
Then technically he will not be extending his term as president. He'll just be there in a different iteration.
A different iteration, that's the thing. And that's what I thought when I saw the video, is that the reason I'm saying I do not believe him is because he's a politician. So this same message down the line can be convoluted. Maybe the terms would have changed and he will not extend his term limit because the new term limit will be 20 years.
If I was asked that question by that Muzungu lady, I would have said the same thing.
Yeah.
I would
of course, you can't say anything.
Yeah, you cannot say anything else.
Different. Also remember that he said since 1992 no president has extended their term. Technically, then Moi only had 2 terms if you're counting from 1992. Because the law does not apply retrospectively.
That is true. And maybe we'll see what iteration we will come back in. I will not go back to that. But I want us to pick a winning headline. What do we say about the star?
I would. That's my winning headline. I will not extend my term.
I think I would. My winning headline I would award to the Daily Nation because it's very gallant. It is topical, it is extremely important, and the way it is crafted is very thought out. They say, let's talk about rape because they know as Kenyans and as Africans, those are one of the topics that we don't want to discuss, yet it is very, very essential that we do.
In fact, I've just remembered, bear with me, today is my rookie day. We have a 3-part criteria that we use to break down the headlines for you. We ask ourselves 3 questions. Is the headline topical or is it speculative? Is it repetitive or is it groundbreaking? And is it thoughtful or just plain lazy?
It is all those things, the Daily Nation.
Then that makes the star speculative. Toss it. And that makes the standard making executive decisions, as you said today.
Yes.
And that makes the standard
This guy, let me tell you before you move on.
Repetitive.
I had already agreed with DM. So executive decision nullified.
Nullified. So Daily
Nation
is our winning headline and toss the standard. On to our political pieces that we call cartoons in this country. Again, we have a 3-part criteria that we use to break them down. We ask ourselves, is it humorous or is it dry? Is it satirical or is it pessimistic? Is it effective or just plain lazy?
Victor Ndula, The Nation.
Yeah.
You have caricature of Uhuru Kenyatta drawn as Peter Marangi for Duraku. And there he is painting the Jubilee logo. And on the logo, the joining hands, the 2 extra, the set of hands holding the hands that are holding each other together. And down there, instead of tuko pamoja, it is tuko pamoja na wengi. And I think here is the context of this is Wiper and CCM chama cha mashinani joined Jubilee in what they call a cooperation agreement.
In addition to KANU.
In addition to KANU as well.
The new logo here, Ndula's logo, is grotesque.
Yes,
and convoluted.
It really is. But it's a depiction of the party now. What is it? Is it Jubilee? Is it Jubilee tuko pamoja? Is it Jubilee tuko pamoja na wengi? We don't know.
It's an amalgamation.
And anytime you have an amalgamation, that is Frankenstein's monster.
It's Frankensteinian. In the Standard, we have the African Development Bank president in his signature bow tie, Akinwumi Adesina, and he's drawn confidently smiling in his suit. The words on his bow tie include favoritism, private gain, cronyism, misconduct, lack of integrity, unethical conduct, and nepotism. The Adesina has been subject of some severe allegations in the past few months, and it's contributed to the depleting confidence in the African Bank, especially by the US government. In fact, an investigation into Adesina's conduct was concluded, and they found, and they did not, the allegations were not substantiated, but America has done a fresh look into the charges against him.
The last person who should ever accuse anybody of misconduct is the U.S. government. And this, I think it's Is
it a witch hunt?
I think
or is it a deal
hand.
gone bad?
See, this is a man, he's a president of the African Development Bank. Have you ever heard an African saying anything wrong about the president of the World Bank, IMF, any Bretton Woods institution?
Because they can't.
It's because they can't. It's because the West are some of the biggest funders to AfDB. Now, the point is this: we have to gain some form of independence. By the time the Americans are putting out corruption allegations against this man, it means they already have a hand as to who gets the capital and who doesn't.
We'll see how that story unfolds.
How that goes. On to our last cartoon from The Star, and Ozone has drawn in an ode to Avengers Endgame, Uhuru as Thanos. In fact, it's stated at the top, Uhuru Thanos. And he has him holding the Infinity Gauntlet. And the Infinity Stones are ODM, KANU, CCM, and the fifth one is unnamed, and we're thinking that's now Jubilee, original. Yes. And it says, instead of Avengers, it says Scavengers Endgame.
Wow. This is in bad taste. Come on, Ozone. Uhuru Kenyatta is not
but
scavenging small parties.
He's scavenging small parties.
That's what he's trying to say.
It's a very witty and funny description, though.
It is, though. I like the description. So what do we say about our three cartoons? Is it Adesina?
Yeah.
Or the two Uhurus?
Or Uhuru Marangi.
Uhuru Marangi versus Uhuru Thanos.
I want to go with Marangi.
I think I'll put in my vote for that one as well.
Marangi.
I think I like Uhuru Marangi as well. Tuko Pamoja na Wengi takes it as our winning cartoon. And Daily Nation gives us both our winning cartoon and our winning headline. And what is our final thought?
And now our final thought. It is inspired by a book entitled Bearing the Cross, Martin Luther King Jr. and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference by David J. Garreau.
Before we get there, let's take a quick look at the books that have been looked at this week. On Monday, we took a look at the book How Christianity Changed the World by Alvin J. Schmidt. The book took us through a journey of how Christianity has changed the world for the better. I mean, we all are Judeo-Christian, if we really look at it. On Tuesday, we looked at a book titled Contentious Traditions, The Debate on Sati in Colonial India by Lata Mani. In this book, it talked about how Sati, which was banned in 1829, it was a process of widow burning, and it reminded us of how the women who were the victims of Sati were omitted from the debate on whether they should live or die. We looked at it from a Christian perspective and how Christ engaged women in a way that was counterculture. For instance, how Mary wiped his feet and women were the first ones to see his tomb after his death and resurrection. So it was safe for us to say that Christ was the first feminist. On Wednesday, we took a look at the book Amazing Grace, William Wilberforce and the Heroic Campaign to End Slavery by Eric Metaxas. The book tells the story of the remarkable life of the British abolitionist William Wilberforce and his passionate 28-year fight to abolish British slave trade. He abolished this back in 1807, and he also fought to abolish slavery in the British colony, which he won in 1833, 3 days before his death. On Thursday, we discussed the book The Slave's Cause, A History of Abolition by Manisha Sinha. In the book, the author challenges the notion that abolitionists looked a certain way, but rather talks about the different faces, black, white, free, slaved, that fought for the abolition of slavery. We also focused on Harriet Tubman, a very spiritual woman who made history and huge contributions to the freedom and emancipation of slaves. Today's book, as you've been told, Bearing the Cross. DM?
Although this book was good one, Miss Kay.
Fantastic.
So although this book was written in 1986, way back when, it's still thought to be or regarded as the most detailed and thoroughly researched book about Martin Luther King Jr.'s public life and about the civil rights movements of America in the 1950s and 60s.
Yeah.
So the author David Garrows interviewed hundreds of MLK's friends and enemies to create a complete picture of the man, his legacy, and his struggles. The book is so detailed, guys, that sometimes he gives accounts in 20-minute increments. He said, and then Martin Luther did this, and then 20 minutes later, and then the next day, and this and that. Yeah. I must say the writing is very dry and very clinical, but it's also very factual. I think the author deliberately moved away from drama and emotion because he was writing about an idol. A lot of people see him as an idol of the civil rights movement. Right. So he made that separation and painted him as a man. Although I do think that it worked pretty well, whatever your leanings are, in the end you see very clearly how significant Martin Luther King was and the contributions that he made to American history. Despite his shortcomings that are very elaborated on in the book. He talks about Martin Luther King's vanity, his adultery, and other intrigues such as his alleged associations with people who were communists, which caused the FBI to target him. At that time, communism was like terrorism now. It's like saying Obama has associations with Al-Qaeda or Al-Shabaab. So the book is written chronologically. It begins in 1955 on the very day that Rosa Parks went home tired from work, and she sat on the bus and refused to stand for a white man. Yeah. This also marked the beginning of Martin Luther King Jr.'s life as a public activist, as a civil rights movement activist. And he participated very prominently in what became the Montgomery bus boycott. Yeah. The bus boycott was very successful. It led to the integration of bus services in Montgomery, Alabama. And Martin Luther King became the face of it. It was his face and his name and his speeches that made their way into the newspapers and into TV screens. So it's really when his charisma and oratory came out. So inspired by the success of the Montgomery boycott, King and other black leaders, black Christian leaders, decided to come together and form a new organization called the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, and that is when it began. And this was really about structuring the struggle against the different kinds of segregation that black Americans faced at that time. And the goal was to do this by peaceful means. Martin Luther King was a follower and admirer of Gandhi. In fact, the book tells us that at some point, remember, there's a time when he was delivering a speech and he was stabbed, and he got treatment and went to India. And at that time, when he was recovering, he attended the Gandhi Institute to learn more about Gandhi's methods. Yeah. Anyway, so the book gives us a very clear picture of this struggle, the different challenges that he had, including his black counterparts. Not all of them supported him because obviously there's those associations like the NCAAP that had been around for such a long time, and then this new kid on the block, Martin Luther, comes. Suddenly he's on the cover of Time magazine. Suddenly he receives a Nobel Peace Prize, and they saw him as this man that is taking all the attention and the credit for work that they had done for such a long time and benefiting personally. So the book gives us all these accounts, and finally, of course, ends with his death on the 4th of April, 1968. Yeah. So Martin Luther King Jr., a giant who JFK described as, he is damn good.
You know what, guys? I was just thinking when I was reading this book, and I asked myself, because DME mentioned peaceful means as the means as to how these guys would achieve equality. Was this the original sin? I mean, with what is happening right now in America, with the George Floyd scenario and all that, if they had acted violence in the beginning, would the white man have respected the black man? But anyway, let me first speak of the chapter that...
We need to revisit that question.
We shall revisit this question, this thought.
Yes. I was doing the chapter on the Meredith March, the origins of Black Power, and here on June 16th, 1966, we're completing the march begun by James Meredith. That's why it's called the Meredith March. A man called Stokely Carmichael. This reminds me of Carmichael. And of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC. He rallied a crowd in Greenwood, Mississippi, with a cry, "We want Black Power," right? And so he was asked, "What do you mean by this? We want Black Power." And then he says, "It is when you talk about bringing this country to its knees, anytime it messes with a black man. Any white man in this country knows about power. He knows what white power is. And he ought to know what about Black Power is." And I agree. But then, this man called Martin Luther King did not believe in Black Power. In fact, he said
he didn't believe in power for power's sake.
He said it was an unwise choice. In fact, he says, but he did not do it openly, though. He did not do it openly. He says, in private, he said that Black Power was born from the wombs of despair and disappointment. It is a reaction to the failure of white power to deliver the promises. Now, let me just put this into context. You see, when I was looking at the protests back in the States, and there was this lady who had a placard written, "We are not our ancestors. We will mess you up." You see, that is anger that has mounted for generations upon generation upon generations. Why? Because the only means they used to fight the white man was peaceful.
No.
Yes, but before you say what you have to say, let me finish and let me just validate my point using Martin Luther King's words. He says, "The Negro is shedding himself of his fears, and my real worry is how we will keep this fearlessness from rising to violent proportions. Maybe we just have to admit that the day of violence is here. Let violence take its course." 2 weeks later, or 3 weeks later, or weeks later, he was assassinated. On that day that what was it?
The 4th of April, 1968.
Yes.
But to him, that is not true.
See, I'm reading from him.
The struggle, the American struggle, the Black American struggle has always been bifurcated. There's always been wings like Martin Luther's who believed in peaceful means, but there's been the Malcolm X's, there's been the Black Panther, even
Nation of Islam.
Even the slaves themselves revolted violently. And this is true to all struggles for independence around the world. In South Africa, there was the ANC that were articulating their need for freedom and going to jail for that and going to court. But then there was also the Umkhonto we Sizwe, who were the armed part of the struggle. In Kenya, we had people going to Lancaster, the Tomboyas and the Jomo Kenyattas, but who did we have in the forest? People who took up armed struggle. So there's never been a fight for liberation that did not have
two sides
of arms.
To an extent, I agree. To an extent, I disagree. And let me tell you why. You see, Kenyan case, you had the Mau before it formed. I mean KCA, and then you had Kawi, and then you had KCA. They sent this man called Jomo Kenyatta to London to go and ask the British colonial government whether you could have independence. About in the 50s, during the emergency, Mau breaks out, and they take on these white fellows. Look, our concerns as Africans fighting colonization, we are fighting for so many things. We are fighting against colonization, we are fighting for our land, we are fighting for our dignity. The black man in America was fighting for equality. Land was not taken away from them, but their dignity and equality was taken away from them. Now, my point is this: the object of aggression was different in different places.
But the underlying thing is freedom.
The degree of violence meted out to the Muzungu in Africa, I think, was far superior to what was meted out in America.
Allow me to take us back a little bit. I think, bear with me, today's amateur hour as I try to come back onto winning headlines. Our thought this week has been on religion and the state. And I think today, while not toning down the struggle that the African people are going through, the African American people are going through in America, and the iteration it's currently taking, and the way that they should articulate their grievances or fight for their freedoms and their rights. I'd like to take us back to the time of the two I've been to the mountain speeches. That's what I'm going to call this. If we look at the journey that the civil rights movements took and talk about what is central today, which is the role of the black church in the movement, I think that yes, MLK took on a very
subtle
approach.
Yes.
But it was still an important approach.
Yeah.
And it was still an important approach because if we look at their struggle, and I'll take this all the way back to slavery and talk about even the book that you discussed on Wednesday, no, on Tuesday. No, not Tuesday, Thursday.
Yes.
Slaves' cause in the abolition movement. There's a reason why religion was central to all of them.
Yeah.
It was the only space in which the African had that they could express themselves. They were locked out of every other possible avenue, and they used what they had at the time.
Yeah. That's where they had legitimate leaders, because leaders were not in government.
They were not in government.
Yeah.
And that was the only space that they had, if you could call it. In fact, I think some people have said that the first freedom movement was the movement to have a black church.
Yes.
Because the principal institution of oppression and racism in the country was the white church. They did not have access to it, they did not have space to it, they could not listen to what it said. But they fell back on churches as their way to express themselves, as the way, a place in which they could, one, form leadership, and leadership that was mainly male, because the male population didn't have a space in which they could articulate their vision and their mission and their purpose. And even as they grew on, they also had a source of funding, and they also had an institutional ability to initiate and maintain protests. So that was the only way that they could do that, and they used the church. And that by the time we were coming into the civil rights movement, the churches, the black churches, had established themselves as proper institutions. And perhaps as the spaces, the political spaces in which the black had access to have increased, so has their ability to be able to articulate their issues and their recognition of their exclusion. So maybe right now we have a different iteration of the struggle, but also it shows that we have moved, we'll have also different voices that will articulate it.
And the theatres have moved. But remember also at that time there was another theatre, which was the courtrooms, and this is the channel that the NAACP chose to take. So I think that is really the point, that when the people are at war, when there is a struggle, particularly of liberation, then there's many theatres of approach. There's the organizing principle that is intellectual. There's the brain, there's the brain, and then there's the brawn. And then there's the brawn.
But there will always be division. Again, whenever you're in a struggle, there is no right or wrong way to articulate your struggle and to articulate the pain that you're going through. So that's why even within the movement for civil rights, you had the non-violent approach by Martin Luther King, and you also had the Malcolm X, take your violence by power. And even within the church, they also had a bifurcated approach on whether or not the church should be used for it. So yes, the church does give you a large history of oppression and survival and liberation. I mean, we can even start with the Israelites. They were slaves who got liberation. So it gives them that history, but it also gives them a history of oppression. So for some people, even within the church themselves, they did fight Martin Luther King. They said, you are a pastor, your work is on the pulpit to preach. And they split up. And some people saw the SCLC, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, as the decentralized political arm of the black church. So even within his own space, he was being progressive and creative in his expression of power and his fight for liberation.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
I don't know. I think I like this book.
It's a good book.
It's a good book.
It did, however, neglect to paint what you were just talking about, Miss Kay, the very spiritual aspect of Martin Luther King, and that his work was highly inspired by his Christian background. And this is why him and his friends and his associates at that time decided that the organizing principle of this movement will be based in the church.
And you have to agree with them. I'll borrow from 2J. I think it's how to start a revolution. And one of the people that you require in a revolution is a man of words. And I think that pastors, in essence, are men of words. They are charismatic by nature, and they are able to frame and articulate a message. They are able to feel the grievances of the people and collectivize those thoughts and articulate them. And they also have pulpits, a captive audience, and a way to practice.
And an appointment once a week, same place.
That's true. This is the Fifth Estate Winning Headlines. Today I came in, bear with us, it's amateur hour, and we had a discussion about the state and religion. I'd like to leave you with a quote from a guy called Tony Campolo. He's an American sociologist, a pastor, an author, a public speaker, and the former spiritual advisor to Bill Clinton. I can't claim any fame with this man, but he says this: mixing politics and religion is like mixing ice cream and manure. It doesn't affect the manure that much, but it really messes up the ice cream. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, and we are available on your TV screens. Find us on Pang, Free to Air, GoTV, and StarTimes. Have a great weekend, and remember, It doesn't matter what your struggle is. You can articulate it using whatever means you have necessary.
Either ice cream or manure.
Bless.